this week we're going to start talking about string bending basics, just the basic mechanics of it. Over the years, I've kind of realized that a lot of my students don't have a real solid concept of what a string bend is. To them, it's just a physical motion that they push a string up. So there's no target note. They have difficulty with the intonation or how in tune they are. There's no rhythmic variety. The idea that basically you're articulating a melody using the string is kind of a foreign idea. So we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of it. We may do this over a couple of lessons, but we're going to start with basically how your hands work and talking about target notes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we actually do bend a string. If you notice, like I'm playing here basically playing an A minor or A blues, and the first step, the first bend I'm doing is a whole step. I'm going from G to A. All right, and I know that when I bend this note, it should be going up a whole step. It should be that sound. I want to make sure I'm getting that in tune. All right. When you do the bend, though, if you notice, I've got my fingers kind of supporting it. People do it different ways. And if I bend, like if I'm bending with my first finger, yeah, I'll just do it with the first finger. Second finger, I might support it with the first finger, or maybe not. You know, sometimes I'll do, you know, where I'm playing that note and then maybe getting a note on another string. But whenever I bend with the third finger, it's almost always got the second finger on the string behind it to support the finger. Gives me more control over what I'm doing. All right. If we look from this angle, what you're going to see is that there's a lot of power that comes from back here. You'll see the actual movement of the hand, right? We don't just push with the fingers, all right? I usually tend to, it's almost like opening a door with like a paddle handle. All right, and then these fingers here, yeah, they kind of stay arched, right? And that transmit all the power or the force that comes from here to the string. If you like let these collapse or you let them kind of move around a little bit, you're not going to get a direct transmission of that, and you have less power. So I'm playing on 11 gauge strings on this guitar, and it's a Strat with a hardtail. So it's almost like a Telecaster in the fact that it's got a little bit more, requires a little bit more oomph to get the strings up to pitch. But if I wanted to, it's a step and a half bend. Maybe let's see what I can do. Oops, I'm going to break a string. Almost. I don't think I can do it on this guitar. But I can do some pretty... I can do this two-step bend there, right? And if you notice, it all comes from back here. Even when I bend with the first finger, all right, I'm not trying to do anything with the finger as much as the whole hand and the forearm. Keep that in mind. Also, the motion, see there's kind of an arc like that. If we look from this angle, you see that there's a lot of space under here. All right, and then sometimes you think about this as being kind of like a, you get some leverage right there. I'm looking for like a fulcrum or something like that, where it's, right, so it kind of, the whole hand kind of swings up when I do the bend. All right, so I'm going to get a little closer and I'll do some more bending. So that's basically how my hand looks when it's bending. And like I said, most of the time I'm actually supporting the third finger with the second finger. And you should be able to bend with any finger. But the majority of the time, I'm like most other rock guys or blues guys, that third finger is kind of the one that has the most control and the most power for this sort of thing. All right. So the overview on this part, remember that the force comes from back here. It's not just from pushing your fingers. The fingers stay pretty much arched, right? And that arch actually gives us more transmission of the power of the force generated here to the actual string right here. All right, when I use my third finger, I usually have the second finger riding on the string behind it. Sometimes my first finger is just kind of sitting on everything else and controlling. Or with the pentatonic stuff, you'll see that, I'll kind of roll that finger segment. Right, there's a lot going on there with that finger. So it really depends on what you're doing. But as far as the third finger goes, that's how I'm going to physically approach the bends. Now, a good exercise for you to practice bending in tune is to play a target note and say, I want to practice whole step bends. So you go back a whole step, which is 2 frets. So you hear that note? Ba. And sometimes I'll sing it because I want to hear it in my mind's ear. I want to be aware of what it should sound like in my head. Because if you're just kind of blindly, pushing the string around to try and find a note, it's never going to sound right. All right, a bend is really just another way of playing a melody. It should be accurate and it should be specific. A lot of times people just think, well, I'm just going to push a string wherever I want to, right? And it may not be in tune. There are times where maybe I'm playing in A Dorian. I've got these notes. Right, so that bend right there is a half step. I'm going from F sharp to the G. That's a whole step. Oops, that one kind of sucked, but you get the idea, right? So you practice each of the intervals that you're going to bend. I got my whole step, and I can even just go up the string and try different notes. But you always want to hear the target note. And if you're close but not perfectly on, a little vibrato kind of helps. All right. To me, it's worse to overshoot a bend than it is to actually bend a little flat and then move into it. Instead of vibratoing all the time, sometimes I'll bend a little flat on purpose and then slowly move the string up. Right? Instead of going where I've got that vibrato where the note sounds kind of frantic. Right? There's just that small amount of movement that actually kind of keeps the note warm. Because vibrato, if you think about it, guitar sounds terrible like that. But if you warm it up with a slight vibrato, a slight moving of your hand on the string, right, it actually sounds more vocal. It also sounds a lot more pleasant, right? But for bending, sometimes people overbend. They tend to bend sharp. It's kind of the whole like Kirk Hammett from Metallica kind of thing. He tends to like that sort of deal where everything ends up being not in tune. But for me, I like this subtle thing where it's slowly approaching, and then I might vibrato at the top, nice and smoothly. All right, and that's kind of a thing to think about to work on. It's hard to get at first, but to me that's an alternative to doing a wide vibrato for everything, because doing a big vibrato on everything makes every lick you play sound the same. Whereas this, that sort of thing to me actually just sounds a little bit more musical. And that's a personal preference thing. People do things differently all the time. So that's the basics of this with the bending, right? The first exercise you can do, play a note, go back a whole step, bend up. And so on. Do it on every string. But just practice making sure that you know what the whole step sounds like. And then try half steps. And if you're brave, try whole step, step and a half. All right. If I'm playing a minor pentatonic, So switching up the distance of the bends is always kind of a nice way to break up your phrases too, instead of everything being a whole step bend. So you've got those kinds of exercises. Next time we're going to talk a little bit about oblique bends. Some of my favorite little fake pedal steel licks. A couple things that you can do to